Hi there, everyone. Are you an HR professional getting sometimes frustrated, not getting your voice heard by management? Or perhaps you are eager to develop professionally and learn a more strategic approach to HR, talent acquisition, or employer branding, but you don't know where to start? Or this one. People in your workplace seem to have a very negative attitude towards HR, and it's not your fault, yet you suffer from their past experiences with HR and you want to prove yourself as a harmonious collaborator. If even one of these resonate with you, then you put those sneakers on and go for a walk so that you can focus on this episode. Because in this episode of the Building a Modern Employer Brand podcast, I have a really fascinating guest with me, Tammy Alvarez, who's the CEO and founder of Careers Winner Circle. And what I really love about her is that break all the rules approach she's known for. So I'm going to let Tammy introduce herself, and then we will jump into a conversation on how HR can get stronger, a seat at the table. Go ahead, Tammy.
Thanks, Susanna, for having me. It's always a pleasure. And I am so excited to talk about this topic because I'm not an HR professional. I was, one of the ones that drove my HR people just crazy. And so just to give you a little bit of my background, I spent my corporate career on Wall Street. I ended up as a C-level executive and ultimately managing 2,000 people in 35 countries and did some really big things because my background was all about transformation. And as the buildings were burning, figuratively speaking, my team was running in as everyone was running out. And I just loved the adrenaline rush and making that big impact. And so much of that was about talent and making sure that you had the right people at the right time and that you were building talent, and having all of those, discussions, because the best laid plan doesn't mean anything if you don't have the people that can execute. And so I spent my career really very much working on my teams and helping develop them. And I loved my career until I didn't. And I remember, sitting there one day and I'm like, you know what? I just can't do this another minute. It's like same stuff, different acronym. And I was just bored to tears. And so I decided one day that I was just going to cash out of Wall Street, move to a tropical island in Central America off the coast of Belize and start this coaching company. And so that was about 6 years ago. I had no idea what I was doing as an entrepreneur, made every mistake you can possibly imagine. But now we've got 7 coaches, we've got a thriving practice, and we're just so excited to be able to bring some of our thought leadership to audiences like yours.
Wonderful. I mean, the funny coincidence is that today, as we're recording this episode, it's the National Entrepreneurs Day in Finland. So happy Entrepreneurs Day to you, Tammy.
Thank you, and to you. Yes.
Thank you. Wonderful. So let's talk about through your experience. And I think it's really fun because I guess, I represent both the CEO side, the leadership side, but also I had a long career in HR. So I've also been one of those people that the management director is driving nuts with their ever-ending requests and wishes and expectations and goals and whatnot. But I mean, I have to say that even though I love a lot my career as an entrepreneur and doing what I do these days, I loved working in HR as well. And my best experiences are collaborating very closely with the CEO and being able to hear from them what their plans are, what their visions are, kind of like be one of those sounding boards, because I would just literally take all in and use it when I was planning what we need to do in HR. So I think this is going to be a lovely conversation, hearing also from seeing whether, I go into my HR mode and you're going to go into your CEO mode and see how this works out.
It's going to be great. Yes.
It is. Yeah. So when you and I spoke and planned for this episode, and we're talking about the 3 different elements, one which, at least in my experience, has been kind of a forever conversation, like how can HR kind of rise up and get that seat at the table and get more respect and I guess trust also that they are able to make sound decisions for the business. What kind of advice would you give? What experiences have you got with HR and giving them that voice that they want to get?
Yeah. And we have 6 hours to talk about this, right? So
Yes.
so many ideas, right? And so, and you hit on two really important things in terms of, really having that credibility to be at the planning table, but also the trust.
Yeah.
And trust is so hard to achieve when you're sitting in that HR seat. And, so we'll make sure we tie back off on that. But I think one of the most important things HR professionals can do to really level up and become that trusted advisor of the executive team, right? The CEO and beyond, is to find a way to yes. Now, I get it. And I was one of them. So, you've got leaders running around with scissors, making all kinds of decisions. And your job as an HR professional is to make sure you protect the organization. And many decisions and strategies make that a very, very difficult part of your job. And it's very common to immediately go into, hang on a second, we can't do that for very, very good reason. Right? It's like you're breaking laws in 6 countries, we have lawsuits, not to mention the ethics of some of the decisions people make. So we've got all of these competing things that are happening. And it's so natural to have somebody say, we can't. And that's why you don't have a seat, right?
Right.
If you start with, let's work together to find a path to get you where you need to go. The way you want to get there, probably too risky for what the organization is willing to accept. But there's always a way, there's always a path forward. And I think at the end of the day, you've got to realize that at some point in time, the business is going to be willing to accept a level of risk that you may not personally agree with. But as an advisor, right, then that's important to say, okay, here's all the things that, that could go bump in the night. Here's where we're exposing ourselves in terms of legal or anything else that's going on. But when you start with yes, when you start with, okay, I understand what you need to accomplish. Let me help you find a couple different paths to get there. And we can discuss what your risk tolerance is as an organization. All of a sudden, you no longer become that Dr. No. You no longer become the person that they avoid because they don't want to hear no. And then you end up cleaning up the mess at the end, right? Because they go forward and start to do stuff. You're like, hang on a second, we can't even do this, but it's almost too late. And so I always found that my best HR partners would acknowledge the goals I needed to achieve and help me think through different ways of accomplishing what I needed to get done. And in most cases, they had thought about things that I had not considered, or they had brought up risks that I didn't know about. Right? Like if we've had to reduce force, it's like, well, that's a big population in this area. That brings different regulatory requirements in terms of notification and headline risk and all those other things. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Right. And so there's a lot of different things that as a business person, you don't know. And I think having an advisor that doesn't stop you from doing what you need to do, but helps you find a path forward safely is the best way to earn that seat at the table.
Wow. That's a really excellent way to put it. What would you say would be the best ways when you mentioned that to acknowledge your goals, the CEO's goals? What's the best way to get there to understand? Because I know that it's not something that many CEOs share with the HR. I know a lot of HR directors that literally have no clue what the business strategy is, for example. To acknowledge your goals, give us some advice. How can we get there?
Yep. And so I think it's a little bit chicken and the egg, right? Because you want to become that business enabler because then they'll want you there, right? But you also need to know what they're accomplishing so you can help provide, guidance and things like that. So I think this is a perfect time of year too. I'm not sure when we're actually going to broadcast, but right now, we're sitting in planning season. So we're doing strategy planning for next year. We're doing talent planning. We're doing promotion cycles. We're doing all of those things right now. So this is a very HR intensive time. And this is a great time to start to tuck into those questions of, okay, as the CEO's direct reports are coming to you and saying, promotions, raises, this is what we're going to need to hire for next year, or maybe we have to reduce, then take a minute and ask them to share with you how this fits into their business strategy. Right? Take some time to figure out, okay, so I'm doing my goals as an HR professional. If you're sitting in that seat, I'm trying to figure out what are the things I want to make the biggest impact on in the following year. And in order for me to do that, I need to understand what your business goals are. Because when I understand what you're being held accountable to, whether it's increase in revenue, whether it's an operational team that needs to increase their quality, but when you understand what your stakeholders are being measured on, and how that fits into the business strategy, now you can start to layer in your capabilities to say, I think I can help you here. And when you can show the way for someone to be, to reach their goals with your help, instead of having to work around you to get done what they need to get done, now all of a sudden you're elevating your level of trusted advisor. And then that's how you start to get invited to these types of conversations.
That kind of sounds like a consultant, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That you are selling your knowledge, your experiences, your solutions for your clients. I mean, that's how I work as a consultant. Yeah. So you have to take that kind of I think the advisor role is actually very suitable for this, but the kind of an attitude that your job is actually not to be the HR guardian of your processes, but how to leverage your experience, your knowledge, your insights, to deliver the business goals. And your kind of context are the people.
Absolutely. And so many HR people are like, that's not our policy. We can't do that. And while you're technically right, that's not helpful.
Like, exactly.
Okay, so it's like, and the way you have that conversation is really understanding, hey, help me understand what business outcomes you're looking for.
Right.
Forget about the people for a second, even though that's what we're here to talk about. What are the business results you're trying to achieve? And then, okay, so once you understand what their true north is, they're like, okay, so help me understand how this approach achieves that goal. Because even if you think don't assume. And you want to have that leader walk you through, well, if I pull this lever, do this, then I'm going to get there. Okay, so now you know how they're thinking. You know the policy. And so it's easy enough to say, okay, that's a level of risk that the organization typically won't take. Now, remember, you're not saying no. You're not talking about a policy that no one cares about, right? But you're saying that's a level of risk that the company normally is uncomfortable with. So we can do one of two things. I can come up with some other options that will get you where you want to go without having to go through all the red tape. Or we can escalate this, make a business case for it together, and find a different way to do that. And so now you're giving the business owner an option, right?
Yes, you're giving them an option. You're giving them a sense of kind of safety.
Yes.
In their role, making those tough decisions, because now they feel like I'm not alone. I have somebody who knows about this side, and I feel more secure. I mean, I feel safer. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel well advised.
Exactly.
Right. Because most of the time, a business owner is not going to want to do something that's going to introduce a level of risk to the organization that's unnecessary. People, but through lack of knowledge, in terms of that's not their area of expertise, that may be the way they've done it in the past. And so playing into that advisor role is critical. And if you don't have that seat at the table, as with the CEO, then you need to work with their directs, build that level of trust and consultative relationship. And then from there, you will get that seat.
I'm thinking I've never really heard in-house HR people with the title of HR advisor or a strategic advisor or anything like that. Of course, we have those more on a consultative side, or if they're investors or board members, people like that. But mostly we have HR managers, HR directors, vice president of HR business partners. We need more people who have that kind of carry the sort of the torch for being advisors to management.
And in every role. You don't need the title, and I think one of the most difficult things to do in leadership is to lead through influence. Right? It's easy to lead through hierarchy. You own their bonus, right? So, you do have a certain level of clout, but leading through influence, where organizations can really just run into, say, no, I'm not doing that. And okay, well, then where do you go from that? And that is the hardest level of leadership. And so from that perspective, I think if you can start taking that leadership and advocacy role early in your career and become known as that, whether you're called it or not in your title, you're going to have a seat at the table.
Yes. You're going to literally be invited to every seat, every table you want. Exactly.
Yes. Yep.
Exactly.
And that leads to building trust.
Yes. Which is the next one. What are your thoughts on HR building that trust?
And I've seen it done well, and I've seen the train wrecks, right? And so let's start with what not to do first, and then maybe we can take it from there, right? So the HR people, HR runs the companies, right? And I call them kind of like the CIA. They're like the dark ops people that are whispering in the corners, and that just builds such a level of distrust. And and so I think in terms of building that level of trust, you're coming from a negative already, because let's be honest, no one really fully trusts HR. Right? It's just true. And you've got access to too much information. You've got access to, you help recraft organizational structures and all that kind of fun stuff. And you're in those closed door meetings. And so you've got a harder job to do than anyone else in the organization when it comes to actually building trust. And I think the fastest way to build trust ties into what we were talking about before. And that is to help other people achieve their goals. Right. It's not about what you need. It's about getting what you need through helping others. So, the servant leadership, I think, is a bit of an overused term. I'm going to call it a self-serving leadership model, in that when you help other people win, then you win along with them. So, part of building trust is to understanding what they need the most and being that advocate and being that vessel to help them achieve that. I think the other thing is, transparency is so important. And when HR professionals are tasked with leading and navigating through very difficult situations, whether they're reductions in force or changes or mergers, acquisitions, they know what's going on. And most of the time, what I found when I was working with my HR partners is when I asked them a very direct question, I would be lied to. And I would much have preferred, and this was my leadership style when I was, leading big teams, is when you have information that but you're not at liberty to discuss, say it. Say, unfortunately, yes, we've solved for this. I'm not at liberty to talk about it right now. There's some other moving parts in the background that need to get finalized. And as soon as I'm able to share this information with you, I promise you I will. Versus sending people down a rabbit hole, right? Or starting, flaring up some water cooler talk, or worse, or not saying anything, right? Because then that just, in absence of data, people always assume the worst. And so I think the more transparent you can be about what you do and don't know, about what you can and can't say at the moment, the more trust you build. Because okay, and if it's not decided yet, it's like, listen, we're still, thinking through some options. We've got some headwinds that we're working through. We're discussing it. There's no final answer yet. Do you have anything that I need to know that would help me guide us to a good solution? And then let them be part of, at least some of the feedback loop as you're, working behind closed doors. But the whole, lurking in the corners and whispering in the CEO's ear and leveraging that, I think it doesn't do you any good. And I think the third thing, in terms of advice, to be trusted, be surprised how many HR people actually don't keep things confidentially. Right. And it's just blows my mind. Like I lead executives and they're like, I can't believe this HR person sold me out or whatever. So how about we keep our mouths shut a little bit and maintain some confidentiality, but also do what you say and say what you do.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think, you've got an uphill battle to just be that trusted person, just because of the nature of your job. And there's nothing you can do about that. It's not personal. But those are 3 tactics to start to build some trust.
I love those tactics. I have to tap into, first of all, the communication part. Obviously, it depends who kind of owns the internal communication, whether it's the communications department, sometimes it's in the HR department. When I was working as an HR manager, I was also responsible for the internal communication. And it kind of stuck with me that also setting an example of how we should be communicating and sharing information in this organization. So if you're not doing it as an HR, and I think that I was working as an HR person in-house like 13, 14 years ago. And if we're looking at today's environment, people are working hybrid or fully remote from different countries, different time zones. We are relying a lot on technology for communication and sharing information. Good communication skills are more important probably than ever before. I would say that in that role, building trust, it would be really important for them to learn how to be a really great communicator and then set the example of it, how to do it in the organization. So I think that's really important and connects very well with your advice from the CEO's perspective of earning that trust also. One other thing that struck me was I think it's more like a collaboration of all of your, or the putting together all of your advice. But as an HR, do you want to be an enabler or like a preventer or blocker?
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe traditionally HR people are more like the back office people who kind of block everything. There's rules and regulations and systems and processes, and this is the way we do, and there's no other way, and we have this like a huge manual for you. Whereas, do you really need HR people like that these days?
Yeah, I think you need some to set some boundaries.
Yeah,
Let's face it,
sure.
we all need guardrails, and audit has to have something to check against, right? So,
sure.
and it's for our own good, in terms of, I think, the humanity has been taken out of HR to the point where it's no longer effective, right? In its current state. And whether it's hiring, talent development, creating these stupid rules that you've got to stay in one role for 2 years before you can get promoted. I mean, or you can't get any more than a 20% raise if you get promoted, even though you're going to hire somebody off the street for 40% more. These, I think some common sense needs to go back into the rule makers, so I think we need rule makers to help get the guardrails up. I think we need to completely throw everything away and start over again in terms of how we manage our most important resource within an organization, which is their people. But once those are set, then I think you've got to give people the room to think and to make decisions and to have an escalation path. So where it's not just a yes or no. It's okay, so small, medium, large level of risk. What does this situation warrant in terms of severity or outcome or opportunity? And just have advisors who can actually help leaders think through the options and then make a good final decision and then execute. HR started with like payroll and benefits, and that was it. And, leadership development became a thing, and then that went away, right? And so there's just so many different aspects to an HR professional's opportunities from a career growth perspective and the advice and the support that they provide an organization. But I think it all needs a massive overhaul, which is definitely a topic for another episode.
It is. It is. I wanted to ask you something about you talk about like how to get leaders excited about Mondays. So what advice could you give to HR, how HR could contribute to the employees and leaders to get excited about Mondays, regardless of these rules and all the processes that we are providing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would start with themselves. Right? So from an HR perspective, do you have that pit in your stomach on Sunday nights, or are you excited to go to work, or like, oh God, I got to do this again, right? And so let's start with, looking inward and making sure that you're doing work that lights you up. Because if you are not doing work that's in your sweet spot, that you're excited about, that you feel like you're making a big impact, you are not going to help anybody else do that. Right. And so, step one is let's just make sure that you're doing what you need to be doing, right? And you're stepping into that environment where you do love every Monday.
And I have to cut in here because I have that kind of experience also where when I was younger and it was harder to get the voice obviously through, I wasn't that experienced yet. So it didn't light my Mondays in in the desired way when I would go to work and the CEO would be kind of like, HR is not important, or we have more important things than people and HR and stuff. So I guess that's a good kind of connection there, that as an HR you will probably be more excited about Mondays if you have that trust and that respect as an advisor. So going looking inwards, how can you develop yourself to kind of transition from a manager or a coordinator or a policymaker or a director or whatever into an advisor. So
Yes.
that's how to
Step
that's
one, put
how
your own
to get
mask on first,
step
right?
one.
I mean, that's what we're always
Exactly.
hearing on the airplanes
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of helping the organization get there too, we need to start to think about talent development and job descriptions and roles and responsibilities in a new and innovative way. Right now we've got these career paths and, millions of hours are spent on career pathing that no one pays attention to. And,
Exactly.
all of these other things, when it's really, really simple to start to get people to step into the things that they enjoy most.
Right.
And when you start to look at a job,
Mm-hmm.
that someone has to do, whether it's a, entry level to C-suite, there are things that you're good at. There are things that you're not.
Yeah.
And there are even the things that, and so the things that you're good at, there are things that you like to do and things that you don't. Just because you're good at it doesn't mean you enjoy it. And so the conversations really need to be around, what are your strengths?
Mm-hmm.
What energizes you? So what are
Right.
the things that you could do for 12 hours a day and not get tired? And
Yeah.
try and find enough of a blend of people to where you've got a good cross section of talents and capabilities.
Yeah.
Because you always want your teams to play to their strengths. You're going to win more than if you try and get a C player up to a B minus, right? Or you get those A players into rock star status. Your company will grow faster and more effectively when the collective teams are playing to the things that they're good at.
Right.
And so,
Amen to that.
right. So
Yes.
enough of trying to fix the broken, because they're not broken,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
really double down on what lights you up in the morning. How can we get you to do more of this because you're good
Yes.
at it, you love it, we'll see the results. And where is the pile of work that you don't enjoy or that you are not good at? How do we find people who love that stuff? Because people love all kinds of things, and make
Yeah.
sure that the things that are kind of left behind are fulfilled by other people who get lit up by that.
Yes.
And then that's how you really start to think about a fully engaged organization. And because employee engagement has been a hot mess for decades, and it's not, showing no signs of improvement, despite all of our efforts and well-intended efforts at that. And so that's really where I think an HR advisor, where you can start to, as an HR person, help leaders have these conversations with their teams. When you are talking about, hiring for next year and, places that you have to fill, it's not what role do we need to have filled. It's like, what are our business needs? What do we need to get that done? Okay, we got rock stars in 5 out of the 8 things that we need. So let's go find 3 people that love the stuff that everybody around here hates. And let's make sure that we are able to free up the stuff that's slowing our good people down, doing things that they're not good at
Yeah.
or they don't like. And then everyone will benefit. But no one is thinking about talent development this way. And so that's a key part of having everyone love Mondays, is just having them do stuff that they love. It's really basic, but it's just very, very difficult
Do
to
you know
achieve.
Montessori, the method, the teaching method?
Yeah.
So our son went to did the whole kindergarten in the Montessori kindergarten, and I wanted him to do that instead of like a regular public kindergarten, because I've always believed in doing what you're like inspired and motivated to do. I believe in that people can learn anything they want to if they set their heart on it. And it doesn't matter how great you could potentially be in something, if you have no desire for that, you're not going to be good at it. And I think that when I saw him like through those years, going through the development process, like from a little baby to a ready to start school, and they would always like say like, well, today he was just cleaning the windows all day because he just loved doing it, and we just let him clean the windows because he just wanted to do that. And I thought it was like like not, we get so much more out of people when we do that, when we pay attention to, when we ask them, what are you really good at? What do where do you want to get better? What are you driven to do? And how can we connect that with our company mission and with our strategy, with our goals? And I think that's like the best way also to help people understand what we're trying to get done. And I agree with you that it's just for some odd reason we're always like hiring to history, like
Mm-hmm.
past needs, past requirements, not thinking about like that, like outside. Let's forget about the titles and think about like what do we need as a business and where the holes are, like you said.
Yeah.
So Susie Welch, she was married to Jack Welch, which
Yeah.
we know better. But Susie, I've known her for years, and she has constructed this system like called Area of Destiny, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the intersection of your what are you really good at, what are your values that are really driving you, and then where do you see an area where you can grow and develop, that helps the business as well. That is your area of destiny, and that is where you will flourish,
Yeah.
and it benefits the business as well.
Sure.
So I think that we really should change the way that we think about talent development, and this would solve so many struggles in between getting the employees to understand the strategy and what we're doing, when we can connect and tie it together with what they're good at.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so and I don't know why we are so determined. I guess it's like one of those things that everything else is changing around us, so let's just do this the way we've always done it because it feels safe and secure, even though it doesn't really, I mean, it can't help you really feel like accomplished when
Yep.
it's
It
not
is
it's not,
frustrating
you're
because you
like,
want to do
yeah,
good and you want to have these
yeah,
outcomes. It's like, okay, but
exactly,
the constraints I have to work within are limiting your ability to make the true impact that
yeah,
you know
yeah,
that you're able to, that you want to be able to make. And I think
yeah, exactly,
the fundamental difference, which makes this change hard, is, but not impossible, is that you are building a people strategy that is outcome based,
mm-hmm.
not role based. And so when you are looking at, because, it took me a little while to master this, as a leader, I've got a lot of gaps of things that I'm not good at, right? The things I'm really good at, rock star. The things that I'm not, hot mess, right? So I learned that I need people around me to back up all the things that I'm not good at, or else I would have never been able to achieve the things I was able to achieve in terms of business results in my own personal career. But what I would always focus on is the outcome. It's like, okay, so what is our big rock for my group for this year? What's it going to take to get there? Do I have the people who love doing the things that it takes? Because it's a multifaceted need. It's not just
Yeah,
you need one thing to get the outcomes that you're looking for. So it's taking the way we think about job descriptions, hierarchy,
mm-hmm.
organizational structure, accountability, empowerment, and compensation. And it's basically throwing it all away and having to start over again. And that's a really
Yeah,
difficult thing for someone to do, or
yeah,
for a department to do. And typically, organizations are in massive modes of transformation, like you were talking about before.
mm-hmm.
So it's really difficult to do that on a large scale in terms of wipe the slate clean and start over. But there are
Yeah,
iterative steps that HR professionals can take in that advisory capacity to start to really hone in. And you eat the elephant one bite at a time, right?
that's
You
true.
don't eat it in one go. So you really figure, okay, what are the parts of an outcome based culture that are going to give us the biggest lift and the biggest return on our investment fastest? Work on that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right? And then, okay, what's next? And before you know it, you can really start to transform how the organization, thinks about organizes and evaluates their most important asset, right? Which is their teams.
Right. So would you say that would that work also in like really large organizations? I can personally see that that would be fairly easy transformation in a sort of medium-sized or smaller organizations, but large organizations, massive multinational.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, and it's funny you ask because I've done that.
One
Right?
elephant.
So yeah, working for Fortune 100 companies, across,
Yeah,
and managing a ton of
yeah,
people in a bunch of different countries. And so the way I would do it is because I did have to stay within the constructs, right? I had to,
right.
I definitely had my guardrails that were up, so I couldn't be completely off target with where the organization was. But what I would do is I would create functional organizations. And so there'd be a team that drove strategy. There would be a team, that was all about the data. There's a
Oh,
team all about quality. There's another team all about, operations. And so, and then there are obviously my risk teams, right? I was in finance, so always a risk team
yeah,
there as well.
yeah,
And so, but, so the functions, and I put people in that love to do those things. But on
yeah,
a project basis, when we were trying to get initiatives done, it took the entire organization to get it done. Right. So it wasn't one leader that managed,
right,
one of each. It was leaders that managed functionally. And then we would pull together an integrated strategy and then pull the best and brightest, depending on what we needed from each of those teams to be able to deliver. And when you do
right.
that, they have a boss that gets them, right?
Yeah,
So it's like, okay, I'm with my people, but yet,
yeah,
matrix environment. So I hardline into a boss that gets me, but yet I am dotted line into one of the strategic people that really is driving those initiatives and needs to pull the subject matter experts from each of those. So if you're in a big organization, that is the best way to start to get people to step into and focus on the things that light them up, but still leverage them in a more traditional corporate hierarchical structure.
right. That's very interesting. And that sounds so logical,
Some of the
doesn't
simple
it?
things too, right? So
Yeah, yeah. Kind of almost done.
yeah, like, oh, okay, that seems easy. But yes,
Yeah,
it's a lot simpler than it seems, right? In terms of being able to
yeah,
start to solve for the core problem of not loving Mondays, which is just doing
yeah.
stuff you don't care about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's like if you think about HR, if I think about myself, I mean, I in an HR role, I was like the developer, I was the coach, I was the communicator. Those were my strengths. And when I thought about like, for example, developing whether it was the new processes or something, I saw them as products for my customers, internal customers. And if they didn't want to use them for their work, to help them in their work, then they were kind of like failed products. So I didn't feel that I succeeded. So I think it taking that kind of a perspective also that whatever you do in HR, you're not doing it for you. You are doing it to enable others to succeed so that the company will succeed. And if they find your outcomes more of a problem than an enabler, then you're not succeeding in your role.
Then you're going to hate
And you
Mondays too.
probably want
Yes.
to, yeah, and you probably want to succeed in your role. So and I'm sure that HR people who are listening to this episode, I don't think that they haven't thought about it or that they don't want it. Maybe it's just too close that they don't really know like how to make this change or feel like there's never enough time or something. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that you will get the time when you earn the respect and the trust. So we go back to getting that seat at the table again.
Right. And I think quick, pop quiz, right? For
Yeah.
everyone who's listening,
Yes. Good one.
what are the business units that you're responsible for? What are their top 3 business priorities right now? Not people strategy, business strategy. And if you
Yes.
can't answer that question, then you need to go back and talk to your sponsors, talk to your business partners that you're supporting. Don't talk about people. Talk about their business strategies, what they're accountable for, and what success looks like for them from a business perspective. Because
Exactly.
until you really understand that, you can't give good advice. You
Yeah.
can't give good counsel. And too many of, the HR professionals that I worked with just did not understand what we were trying to accomplish. And
Mm.
so I found it a lot easier just to invite them into my staff meetings, which also helped to build trust because my team had to
Yeah.
talk about things they were uncomfortable with HR
Yeah.
in the room. And so there's just a bunch of different strategies that you can do to get closer to the business, because you're a support function, just like legal,
Right.
finance, risk, compliance, audit, all of these things. You're there to support the business growth
Right.
and profitability and stability. And you've got one of the most important roles, within an organization
Exactly.
to do that. But you've got to understand where this business is going. And if you don't have that at the top of your head right this minute, then you've got more work to do.
Exactly. And that's, I've wanted HR people to understand, regardless of the role where you're at, you are sitting on the most precious possession, if you can say that, of any
Yep.
organization. And because of your profession, you know people and behavior really well. You have lots of data, whether you use it or not, but you have lots of data how to get this precious possession to really flourish. Use it, because that's, the organization needs you and the management needs you, the business needs you. So think about how you can be that advisor and enabler instead of a blocker and a preventer. Because you're really hot. You're not a hot mess. You're really hot.
When you do that, then you are hot, right?
Yeah.
And can I
Yeah.
just go on one more rant before we wrap up?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to go on a rant about technology just
Yes.
for a minute.
Do it. Yeah.
Because the humanity has been taken out of human resources. And, I think a lot of it is legal constructs. A lot of it is the things that we have to do, the hiring process, the interviewing process, all the automation, all the AI, we need to remember that we are human beings still working with and trying to support other human beings.
Right.
So, in our virtual world, make sure your video cameras are on. Try and humanize your hiring process in the very beginning. I know no one has time. This is, I'm on the other end of this in terms of helping executives make career pivots in addition to leadership.
Yeah.
And it is just a disaster. And it seems like the more tech we throw at HR, the more tech we try and put into our entire people management strategy, the worse of a job we're doing. And so until we start to, have AI as employees and little, literal robots, right, doing their thing,
Yeah.
we still need to act like human beings. And so that is my
Yeah.
last rant for our HR advocates and professionals here. But do what you can to just reinsert that human touch into everything that you do in terms of, from recruitment to offboarding and everything in between.
Amen. So if my lovely audience wants to connect with you, find you online, where can we lead them to?
Great.
How can they find you?
Yes, absolutely. And we would love for you guys to reach out, right? Happy to carry on the conversation, talk about your personal career or how you can make a bigger impact within your organization. So you can reach us at careerwinnercircle.com. Hit me up on LinkedIn. So Tammy Alvarez, Career Winner Circle. So I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. I find that's the easiest way to do that. And also shameless plug. I do have a book coming out at the end of this year called Escaping the Career Trap: Transforming Your Apathy into Ambition and Loving Every Monday Again. So you'll be able to see that and have access to that in a few months as well.
Oh, wow. Can't wait. Can't wait. That's going to be a really good one. I can't wait to get that in my hands. Wonderful. All righty. That's all for this week, my friends. So connect with us, comment this episode, share your thoughts online with us. We both will engage with you on social media about this conversation. Let's carry this on. This is a really, really important conversation for HR people. I'm one of you. I mean, even though I'm no longer working in HR, but that's, half of my career has been as an HR. I feel your pain. I want you. as an employer branding consultant, I need you to have that seat at the table. So we have a mutual interest here. So if you love this episode, do us a favor, hit the subscribe button. Show me you love it. Give me feedback, connect with me, engage with me. Tell me if there's anything specific you want us to talk about on this podcast, any specific person that you want me to interview. And as always, you can find more information about this episode, links taking you to Tammy. And so all available at www.modernemployerbbrand.com/podcast149. Thanks for listening, or thanks for watching if you're on YouTube. This is Susanna Rantanen, your coach and guide in the world of modern employer branding. It was lovely to have you listening to this episode. And Tammy, thank you so much for your wisdom and these really important advice and messages for HR people out there.
My pleasure. This was so much fun. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Until next week, everyone. Bye-bye.